Well, for more on this, let's speak with Dr John Blaxland. He's an expert in military history, intelligence and security. He's a senior fellow at the Strategic and Defence Studies Centre at the Australian National University, and he joins us live from Canberra. Dr Blaxland, thanks very much for your time this evening.
My pleasure.
We don't know the reasons behind this latest incident, but generally speaking, what sort of reasons are behind these so-called green on blue attacks?
Well, look, there's a mixture of motives. Clearly, the Taliban is trying to rattle the coalition. The thing is that the Taliban has got quite desperate because our tactics have been so effective at demolishing the Taliban leadership that they're turning to really very unusual and spotty sort of tactics to try and achieve their objectives. And their objectives are to try and completely unravel the coalition efforts before the deadline reaches at the end of next year.
As well as some sort of infiltration by the Taliban, how much is it also an extreme example of cultural difference or difference in training, and that this is the result at times?
Well, look, I think training is part of the issue. Part of the problem is that the guys in the Afghan National Army and the Afghan security forces, they know we're leaving. They know that we have better equipment. We get paid better, we get fed very well. They look at us and they think, hey, you guys are looking really pretty flash. They know we're leaving, they're staying, and they know it's going to happen in 18 months. That's got to rattle people. So some people are going to be upset by that. And they also know that we're taking away some of the Gucci kit, where we've got wonderful helicopters, we've got wonderful intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance assets that they won't have once we leave. So they know that it's going to be pretty tricky when we go. It's a very difficult situation for everybody because it's tense. The other aspect of this, which is interesting, is that culturally, Australians and Afghans, we actually don't have a lot in common. And Afghan society for a long time has been quite brutalised. And what is normal and acceptable in Afghan society, given decades of civil war and so much disruption, it's not normal for us. Even our well-trained soldiers still struggle with what is considered normal in Afghan society.
So, Dr.
So
Blaxland,
that's a real issue.
Picking up on what you were saying just there before, as more responsibility for security shifts to local forces, therefore there's this intensifying of training by coalition forces, including Australians, for the locals. How likely is it, how prepared should we be for an increase in these so-called insider attacks?
Well, I think the Taliban will be trying to push that line, and I think there will be some Afghans who feel that maybe this is their way to show themselves as being not part of what they might see as a failing coalition. That's not necessarily the case, though. Look, this is not a lay-down misere by any stretch of the imagination. We've got to remember this is not, I mean, people have drawn analogies to the situation in Vietnam at the end of the Vietnam War. We don't have 15 NVA divisions, North Vietnamese Army divisions, sitting on the border waiting to invade. This is not a cohesive force. The Taliban is not some monolith that is going to rumble through the streets of Kabul any day soon. This is a very different situation. And the strategy that's been implemented that the Prime Minister has talked about is actually given the circumstances, given the bodgy strategy that we've had since we pulled out effectively in 2003 and had to go back in, given those constraints that we now face, this is actually as good as we can make it be. So we've got a strategy that's in place to see us out for the next 18 months. It's tricky, it's very difficult, and there's very few options other than to see it through. But in saying that, I think there are a couple of refinements that we can probably look to help improve security. I mean, we know that our troops have the best equipment that the Australian people can provide them. The equipment of the Australian soldier today was unimaginable 13 years ago when I deployed to East Timor. So the circumstances have changed significantly in terms of what we provide for our soldiers, not only in terms of kit, but in terms of training and preparation. I think there's one area where we can go a little bit further, and that's perhaps in just a little bit increasing our cultural awareness, our language understanding, because this is where I think the nuance is perhaps, we know that it's not necessarily about this, but if we're going to try and improve our odds a little bit here, then increasing some language understanding, some cultural understanding. And to be fair to the Army and to the Defence Force, a lot of that has already happened, but there's probably scope for a little bit more. And that's an area where I think we can improve.
Is that likely to happen now that we're looking at the end game, looking at pulling out in 18 months' time? Are they really going to put resources in to expanding cultural awareness and education as a way of alleviating these sort of situations, if possible?
Well, look, I challenged the Prime Minister at a luncheon a few months back on this question about how we're going to protect our troops as we withdraw, because we knew that as we withdrew from the Vietnam conflict, our Australian casualties actually spiked as we withdrew elements of the force that were critical to protecting the soldiers. So I would argue, and I've had some assurances from folk inside the armed forces, that they're doing everything they can to provide everything possible to provide as much force protection and the best chance of survival possible for our soldiers. So I think there's political will there. I think there's a scope there for a minor adjustment of the force preparation training to enable our guys to just have a little bit more understanding, give them that edge, because clearly in that situation the guys were relaxed, they thought it was okay, but they couldn't speak the language, they weren't picking up any nuance. And I'm not to say that had they done that it would have changed. Who knows? We don't know exactly what happened then. But perhaps that little bit of additional understanding might have helped. One